Hello 2021 and hello S21 Ultra. You see, this is Samsung's highest end offering from the S21 line, and I gotta say, it actually fixes a lot of the issues that the S20 Ultra had from last year. I've been using it for a few days now, so without any further ado, get that popcorn ready and hear my thoughts on the S21 Ultra. Okay, so back in 2020, Samsung released the Galaxy S20 Ultra, and the whole idea of this phone was to have a device that just destroys the competition in terms of specs. So, the S20 Ultra had basically the most insane specs that you could find in a phone, from a 108 megapixel camera to 100 times zoom, to 16 gigabytes of RAM and up to 1.5 terabytes of storage. Yeah, it basically had everything that you could think of. But unfortunately, every single one of these specs had a big asterisk to it, and in the end, the S20 Ultra was a failure. Reviews of this phone were very negative, and even though Samsung did manage to fix a lot of the issues with future software updates, the Ultra line was forever tainted, especially considering that this phone started from $1,400. However, the S21 Ultra pretty much removes all of those asterisks and fixes almost every single issue that the S20 Ultra had. In fact, here are three major categories in which I've noticed some pretty big changes. With the first one being, of course, the camera, the biggest thing of this phone, really. If you take a look on the back, you can probably tell how massive that camera module is. And even though this still has the same 108 megapixel count, this is actually a new sensor with improved low light performance and improved dynamic range, according to Samsung at least. Now, from my testing, I could immediately tell that low light was noticeably improved. In fact, I even managed to get a better low light than on my iPhone 12 Pro, something that was not the case with the S20 Ultra from last year. And it's interesting because the iPhone 12 Pro does have bigger individual pixels compared to this phone, so it seems like Samsung's pixel binning technology is actually working now, like really well. Now, in terms of the dynamic range, the Note 20 Ultra, which had the same sensor as the S20 Ultra, did have some major improvements in software, which helped preserve more shadow detail. And the S21 Ultra improves over that, not massively, but definitely visibly. Like, if you take a look at some HDR shots, well, it was quite cloudy, unfortunately, so I wouldn't really call this proper HDR, unfortunately, but the weather's gonna be like this for the next few weeks. But you can still see how much detail the S21 Ultra has over the S20 Ultra in terms of the shadows, especially. Another fix is in terms of zoom. So the S20 Ultra promised 100 times space zoom. But guess what? Samsung never actually showed any moon photos taken on the S20 Ultra, for that matter. Unfortunately, I lost the photos when resetting the phone for my team, so props to Mr. Mobile for also taking some great moonshots. Ours were very similar, by the way, including the look of the moon itself, and luckily you can see that there are some massive improvements over the S20 Ultra here from last year. The S20 Ultra had 4 times optical zoom, the Note 20 Ultra had 5 times, and now the S21 Ultra has 10 times, which is actually the same as on the Huawei P40 Pro Plus, but unfortunately I never got a chance to actually test that phone. So for me at least, this phone has the highest zoom level that I have ever seen on a phone. And it's absolutely insane, not just for taking super close-up photos while maintaining quality, but I was literally able to zoom in from my balcony to take a look at some of the buildings in the distance. And fun fact, I actually managed to find an Amazon warehouse in the distance, something that I never saw that with my naked eye, and I didn't even know it was there, so that was really cool. Samsung also added this extra layer of stabilization, where if you hold the phone pointed at an object, it would stabilize it even more, and it's pretty insane how well it does that, considering how zoomed in it actually is. Now, of course, that 10 times zoom is quite a lot, and many people might just use it at 2x or 3x in most cases. So rather than Samsung giving you digital zoom from 1x all the way to 10x, they also gave us a secondary zoom lens, which is 3x. Like, what more could you ask for, literally? This is the perfect phone for zoom shots by far. You have that massive 108 megapixel sensor, so you can actually take 108 megapixel shots and then zoom in massively if you want to do that. But then you also have those two extra 3x and 10x lenses for when you want to preserve the maximum amount of quality. Speaking of quality, something that I was never a fan of on the S20 Ultra was just how bad zoom shots were in low light. and that was mainly because Samsung was using a very large 48 megapixel sensor, so the pixels themselves were extremely small, and you need pretty big pixels when you want to take photos in low light. Now, however, they dropped the megapixel count to just 10, so the zoom lenses, both of them, are much better in low light than before, as the individual pixels are larger now. And you can use night mode on any of those lenses. Which means that you can actually take some pretty impressive low-light shots with that 10x optical zoom lens. Now, the only issue that I've had here was that a lot of the times, actually most of the times when there was not a lot of light, the phone would instead use the main 108 megapixel sensor and then punch in digitally, rather than use the zoom module, so the quality actually ended up being worse. Now, one way to fix this is to just point the lens at a very bright light, and then it would automatically switch to the zoom lens. So I just feel like this is something that Samsung could and hopefully they will fix with a future software update. Speaking of fixes, autofocusing was just a nightmare on the S20 Ultra, as that massive sensor actually lacked dual pixel autofocus like Samsung phones have had for years. Now, that was fixed with the Note 20 Ultra, which added a laser autofocus, and now the S21 Ultra improves over that by improving the focusing of the sensor too. And yeah, I just cannot say that I've had any focusing issues this time with the S21 Ultra. And in fact, Samsung even has this new focus assist feature, which kind of works like magic. So you just press a button and boom, your object will be perfectly in focus. Like, I was a bit confused as to how on earth did this work, because it just worked so well, and I initially thought that it was just like sharpening in post, but it turns out that it actually uses the ultra wide angle module, which now has autofocus, and then crops in twice to match the perspective of the main module. Now, I would personally suggest keeping focus assist off, as you end up with a 5 megapixel photo if you use it, but if you do want to take close-up shots, simply just switch to the ultra wide, and now you can bring the phone as close as you can, and you'll get some super sharp macro shots, like better than on any phone that I've used in the past. And I don't know, just this is like one of those extra kind of like hidden features which most people would not find and use, but it's honestly so good. So improved low lights, improved dynamic range, improved zoom, pretty great so far, and we also get one more improvement, and that's in terms of video. With the S20 Ultra and the Note 20 Ultra, my main complaints in terms of video was that you couldn't shoot 4K 60 on all lenses. You could only shoot 4K 60 on the main lens, and if you wanted 4K on the other ones, it had to be in 30 frames per second, which meant that you constantly had to go through the settings and literally adjust the frame rate every time you wanted to switch lenses, which was super annoying. Now, this year they finally fixed it, as we now finally have 4K 60 on all lenses. And fun fact, this was actually missing from my review units, but after the January 1st patch, which just launched a few days ago, it did end up working. So if you don't have this, check for an update and it will work even on the Xmas model. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of the camera. We'll definitely be doing a super detailed Zone of 10 camera comparison, so definitely subscribe and stay tuned for that. But until then, I gotta say, I'm super impressed. Okay, so camera, main improvement in terms of this phone, and the most I want to fix is, now the second area in which this phone got some fixes in is when it comes to the display. So Samsung added 120Hz refresh rate last year with the S20 line, but unfortunately they couldn't do 120Hz at full resolution, whereas their competition actually could. My guess is that it was because of the Exynos 990 processor, which was inside the international model of the Galaxy S20 line. And I think this is the reason why we didn't get native resolution at 120Hz, because that processor was just unable to run the phone at that resolution and frame rate. And to support my theory, the Galaxy Z Fold 2 was actually the only 2020 Samsung phone that supported native resolution at 120Hz. And also, the only 2020 flagship Samsung phone that only comes in a Snapdragon variant, so there was no Exynos model of that phone at all. But now you can actually do 120Hz at native resolution on the S21 Ultra, which is pretty great, and I can definitely tell that it is noticeably sharper than on the S20 Ultra. Other than that, another improvement here is that we get a 25% brighter display, which can now go up to 1500 nits of brightness according to Samsung. and I could definitely tell that it was significantly brighter. Like, it does get super bright indoors, to the point where it will literally hurt your eyes if you max it out, and then outdoors it is also a really useful feature to have. We also have Gorilla Glass Victus now, which is supposed to improve scratch resistance and drop resistance. And this is exactly what we had on the Note 20 Ultra. Now, scratch-wise, I did actually get some scratches on the Note 20 Ultra, but nothing as bad as with an iPhone. So I'm pretty confident that this phone will do pretty well here too. More about that in the full review once I, get to use it for longer. And finally, the last thing that Samsung fixed with the S20 Ultra, at least in my opinion, is the design. You see, I was never really a fan of the flat gray back of the S20 Ultra, and I think the black model actually looked even worse. But now we have a frosted glass back, something that I've been asking Samsung to do for years, and we actually have it on every single S21 Ultra model. Not just on one of the colors like we got with the Note 20 Ultra. And oh man, this Phantom Black color feels and looks so nice. It's honestly the best feeling phone, I think, that I've ever held in my hands. It's just so good. And I also think that Samsung now has the best implementation of a frosted glass back out of any phone, as it does seem to leave the least amount of fingerprints. I also love the camera module design and how it flows into the body. The different texture on it, not even to mention the metal frame around the phone, which is nowhere near as fingerprinty as on an iPhone 12 Pro, for example. And if you buy your S21 from Samsung's website, you can actually configure it and get a unique color combo. Really nice, Samsung. My favorite one is this blue with the carbon fiber camera cutout. I think it just looks amazing. But I think overall, this one looks even better. Now, aside from all the fixes over the S20 Ultra, we also got a few unexpected new features, such as S Pen support, which actually allows you to use either the brand new S Pen that Samsung sells for the S21 Ultra, which is quite thick and, it looks like a proper pen, which is nice. I don't have it, unfortunately. And you can also buy a case and then slide a pen into the case. Or if you don't want to use that, you can just use any S Pen from any previous Galaxy Note device. And I gotta say, I'm not a fan of not being able to slot the S Pen into the phone, so I do prefer the Note's approach. Plus, that S21 Ultra case is quite wide, so it makes the phone even wider and even more difficult to use. So I think Samsung should have just made a magnetic pen or something in the worst case that just attaches to the back. In the worst case, obviously, ideally, we would want to have it inside a device like on the Note series. So yeah, we have it. I just cannot complain, it's an extra feature, but it's just not that great. But if all the rumors are correct, and they seem to have been so far, then Samsung will actually be dropping the Note line in either 2021 or most likely 2022. Other than that, the fingerprint scanner is now 1.7 times larger, and unlocking is super fast and easy. It's also been far more reliable to me than any of the previous ultrasonic fingerprint readers from Samsung, so pretty happy with this, to be honest. Okay, so in the end, Samsung did make a lot of improvements over the S20 Ultra. Now, of course, there's a lot more to talk about, including the actual performance, the battery life, and even more camera features like 8K video recording, RAW performance. This phone can do 12-bit RAW. So yeah, there's a lot more features to talk about, so I'll be using this for a few more days and weeks, and definitely stay tuned for a full camera comparison, so definitely subscribe for that, and also a super detailed review right after. But yeah, until then, thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you have enjoyed this video. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Zen of Tech, signing out. Cheers.